In the vast, silent desert of Midian, a shepherd named Moses led his flock near Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. Suddenly, a bush before him was engulfed in flames, yet it was not consumed. As Moses drew closer, a voice boomed from the fire, calling his name. It was the voice of God, who had seen the suffering of his people, the Israelites, enslaved in Egypt. God declared that he would send Moses to Pharaoh to demand their freedom. Moses was filled with doubt. He was a simple shepherd, a man who had fled Egypt years ago. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" he asked. "I am slow of speech and tongue." God assured him, "I will be with you." "And who made man's mouth? Is it not I, the Lord?" To aid him, God appointed Moses' own brother, Aaron, to be his spokesman. Aaron was eloquent, and together, they would be God's instruments of liberation. Armed with a shepherd's staff and divine purpose, Moses and Aaron journeyed to Egypt. They stood before the mighty Pharaoh, ruler of the most powerful empire on earth. Aaron cast down Moses' staff, and it transformed into a serpent, a sign of God's power. But Pharaoh's heart was hard. His own magicians replicated the feat, and he dismissed their plea. "Let my people go," they demanded. But Pharaoh refused, increasing the Israelites' workload and misery. Thus began the great contest between the will of a stubborn king and the power of the Almighty. God unleashed a series of 10 devastating plagues upon the land of Egypt. First, Aaron struck the Nile with his staff, and the river turned to blood. To it, and the water became undrinkable. Yet, Pharaoh would not yield. Then came the plague of frogs, swarming every corner of Egyptian life, from their homes to their ovens. Pharaoh begged for relief, promising to free the people. But once the frogs were gone, he hardened his heart again. Plagues of gnats and flies followed, tormenting the Egyptians while sparing the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. A pestilence struck their livestock, boils afflicted their body, and a storm of fiery hail rained down from the sky, destroying crops and shattering trees. Still, Pharaoh's pride was unbroken. A swarm of locusts, like a dense, dark cloud, descended upon Egypt, devouring every green thing that the hail had left behind. Then, a profound darkness fell over the land for 3 days, a darkness so thick it could be felt. Egyptians were trapped in their homes, while the Israelites had light in their dwellings. Finally, God announced the 10th and most terrible plague. At midnight, the firstborn son in every Egyptian household would perish, from the son of Pharaoh on his throne to the son of the servant at the mill. God instructed the Israelites to prepare. Each family was to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood. This was the sign of the Passover. When the angel of death swept through Egypt, it would pass over the homes marked with blood, sparing the children inside. That night, a great cry of anguish rose throughout Egypt. There was not a house where someone was not dead. Shattered by grief, Pharaoh finally broke. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the dead of night and commanded them, "Go, leave my people. Take your flocks, your herds, and go serve your Lord." The Israelites did not hesitate. More than 600,000 men, along with women and children, began their exodus. They left in such haste that their bread was unleavened. Guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, they journeyed towards the Red Sea, towards freedom. But Pharaoh's regret was short-lived. His heart hardened one last time. "What have we done, letting Israel go from serving us?" Rached. He mustered his army, his finest chariots and horsemen, and pursued the fleeing Israelites, trapping them against the shores of the Red Sea. Fear gripped the people. Before them lay an impassable sea. Behind them, the mightiest army in the world closing in. They cried out to Moses, "Were there no graves in Egypt, that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness?" But Moses stood firm, his faith unwavering. "Do not be afraid," he declared. "Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then, as instructed by God, Moses raised his staff and stretched his hand out over the sea. A powerful east wind blew all through the night, pushing the waters back. The sea divided, creating a dry path through the deep, with walls of water standing on their right and on their left. Under the guidance of the pillar of fire, the Israelites marched through the sea on dry ground. When the Egyptian army charged after them into the seabed, their chariot wheels became clogged, and chaos ensued. Once the last Israelite had reached the other side, God commanded Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back upon the Egyptians." Moses obeyed. As dawn broke, the sea returned to its full force, crashing down upon the Egyptian army. The chariots, the horsemen, and Pharaoh's entire force were swallowed by the churning waves. Not one of them survived. When the Israelites saw the great power the Lord had displayed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe. They believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Standing on the shores of freedom, they sang a song of triumph and praise, a song that would echo through generations. The journey was long, and many trials lay ahead in the wilderness. But on that day, they were a free people, delivered by the mighty hand of God. Their story of faith, perseverance, and miraculous liberation became a cornerstone of history, a testament to the idea that even in the face of impossible odds, hope can part the seas. Thank you for watching. If you were inspired by this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of history and faith. Imagine a man raised in the splendor of a palace, now a fugitive shepherd in the desert. This is Moses. His life is forever changed when he encounters a bush burning with a fire that does not consume. From within the flames, the voice of God speaks, commanding him to return to Egypt, the land of his birth and his shame. His mission, to demand the freedom of his people, the Israelites, who have suffered under the yoke of slavery for 400 years. Accompanied by his brother Aaron, Moses stands before the most powerful man on earth, Pharaoh, the living God of Egypt. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. Moses declares, "Let my people go." Pharaoh, surrounded by the opulence of his court, scoffs at the demand. Who is this Lord that he should obey his voice? He sees only two desert wanderers, not messengers of the divine. To prove his authority, Aaron casts down his staff, and it transforms into a slithering serpent. But Pharaoh is unimpressed. His own sorcerers perform the same trick. Pharaoh's heart hardens, and he increases the Israelites' workload, ordering them to make bricks without straw. The people's suffering deepens, and their cries echo across the land. God's patience wears thin. The time for signs has passed. The time for judgment has come. Moses and Aaron go to the banks of the mighty Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt. As Pharaoh arrives for his morning rituals, Aaron strikes the water with his staff. In an instant, the sacred river turns to blood. The water becomes a putrid, crimson tide, teeming with dead fish. The stench fills the air, and the Egyptians dig desperately for clean water. For 7 days, the river of life is a river of death. Yet, Pharaoh's heart remains like stone. The second plague begins. A grotesque tide of frogs swarms out of the bloodied waters, covering every inch of Egypt. There in the palaces and in the hovels, in the ovens and in the beds, the incessant croaking is a maddening chorus of divine displeasure. Pharaoh, tormented, summons Moses and Aaron. "Plead with your Lord to take away the frogs," he begs, "and I will let the people go." Moses agrees. The next day, the frogs die, and the Egyptians pile them into reeking mounds. But once relief comes, Pharaoh reneges on his promise. His heart is hardened once more. Next, a plague of gnats, or lice, rises from the very dust of the earth. These tiny, biting insects torment men and beasts alike. They are a crawling, itching scourge that no one can escape. Pharaoh's magicians, who had replicated the first two signs, are powerless. This is the finger of God, they admit to Pharaoh, their own arts failing them. But Pharaoh refuses to listen. His pride will not let him yield. The fourth plague brings swarms of flies, but this time God makes a distinction. The swarms descend upon the homes of the Egyptians, a buzzing, black pestilence, but the land of Goshen, where the Israelites live, is untouched. The message is clear. God is protecting his people. The plague is so severe that Pharaoh offers a compromise. The Israelites can sacrifice, but they must do so within Egypt. Moses refuses. We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, he insists. Pharaoh reluctantly agrees, only to harden his heart again the moment the flies disappear. The conflict escalates. The 5th plague strikes Egypt's most valuable asset, their livestock. A deadly pestilence sweeps through the fields, killing the horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep of the Egyptians. Yet, once again, not a single animal belonging to the Israelites is harmed. The economic devastation is immense, but Pharaoh's spirit remains unbroken. Then, Moses takes soot from a furnace and throws it into the air before Pharaoh. It becomes a fine dust that settles on the Egyptians, causing festering boils to break out on man and beast. The pain is excruciating. Even Pharaoh's magicians cannot stand before Moses, afflicted as they are by the agonizing sores. Still, Pharaoh does not relent. The Lord himself hardens Pharaoh's heart, setting the stage for an even greater display of his power. The 7th plague is announced with a chilling warning. Gather your servants and livestock, for a storm unlike any seen before is coming. A tempest of hail, fire, and thunder descends from the heavens. Massive hailstones, mingled with fire, rain down, shattering everything in their path. The storm destroys crops, trees, and any person or animal left in the open. The sky roars with God's fury. Only in the land of Goshen is there calm. A terrified Pharaoh confesses, "I have sinned this time. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong." He promises to let the Israelites go. But as soon as Moses stops the storm, Pharaoh's defiant heart returns. The land, already battered by hail, now faces a new horror. An east wind blows, bringing the 8th plague, a cloud of locusts so dense it darkens the sky. They descend upon Egypt, consuming every green thing the hail had left behind. The land is stripped bare, a desolate wasteland. Pharaoh, desperate, begs for one more chance. "Forgive my sin only this once," he pleads. A mighty west wind is sent to drive the locusts into the sea. But Pharaoh's repentance is, as always, fleeting. For the 9th plague, God plunges Egypt into a profound and terrifying darkness. For 3 days, a thick, tangible darkness covers the land. A darkness so absolute that people cannot see one another or move from their place. The sun, a chief deity of Egypt, is powerless. Yet, in Goshen, the Israelites have light in their dwellings. This supernatural plague is a direct assault on Egypt's gods. Pharaoh, enraged and cornered, makes a final, foolish threat to Moses. "Get away from me. Take care that you never see my face again. For on the day you see my face, you shall die." Moses gravely replies, "As you say, I will not see your face again." The final confrontation is at hand. God instructs Moses to prepare the Israelites for the 10th and most terrible plague, and for their departure. This will be the Passover. Each Israelite family is to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood. That night, the angel of death will pass through Egypt. It will strike down the firstborn son in every household, from the firstborn of Pharaoh on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner in the dungeon. But where the angel sees the blood on the door, it will pass over. At midnight, a great cry echoes throughout Egypt, a cry of unparalleled anguish and loss. There is not a house where someone is not dead. Pharaoh himself is struck, his own son and heir taken. Broken, humbled, and defeated, Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron in the dead of night. "Go," he commands. "Leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds, and go, and also bless me." After 430 years of bondage, the Israelites are finally free. They leave Egypt in haste, an entire nation on the move, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. The power of an earthly king was broken, and the power of the one true God was revealed to the world. Their long journey to the promised land had just begun. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more stories from the annals of history. In the heart of ancient Egypt, a land of towering pyramids and powerful pharaohs, the people cried out from bondage. For 400 years, the Israelites had been slaves, their spirits crushed under the weight of forced labor. But a promise made long ago was about to be fulfilled. God had sent a leader, Moses, to demand their freedom. 9 plagues had struck Egypt, each more terrible than the last. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained as hard as the stones of his monuments. Now, a final, devastating blow was about to fall. It was a night unlike any other. A stillness fell over the land, a heavy silence, pregnant with dread. Inside every Israelite home, families gathered. They had followed Moses' strange instructions, slaughtering a lamb and marking their doorposts with its blood. They ate in haste, their loins girded, their sandals on their feet, and their staff in hand, ready to leave at a moment's notice. This was the Passover. Outside their marked doors, a grim shadow passed through the streets of Egypt. The angel of death visited every home, from the grandest palace to the humblest dwelling. Where there was no blood on the door, the firstborn was taken. A great cry rose up from the Egyptians, a wail of grief that echoed from the Nile to the desert sands. In the Pharaoh's own palace, his heir was gone. Pharaoh finally summoned Moses and his brother Aaron in the dead of night. His voice, once full of pride, was now hollow with despair. "Up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel," he commanded. "Go, serve the Lord, as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds, and be gone." The moment had come. The Egyptians, desperate to see them leave, were hit on, pressing upon them silver, gold, and clothing. A nation of over 600,000 men, plus women and children, a vast multitude, began their march. They left with the unleavened dough from their hurried meal, a symbol of their sudden departure. After 4 centuries of slavery, the children of Israel were finally walking free, a pillar of cloud leading them by day, and a pillar of fire by night. But freedom's road was not an easy one. As the Israelites celebrated their newfound liberty, Pharaoh's grief turned to rage. "What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" He fumed. He regretted his decision. He mustered his army, 600 of his best chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and thundered across the desert in pursuit. The Israelites had made their camp by the sea, the vast expanse of the Red Sea before them. When they looked back, they saw a cloud of dust on the horizon. It grew larger, the glint of metal, and the thunder of hooves. Growing louder, it was Pharaoh's army. Panic seized them. They were trapped, the sea in front, a vengeful army behind. Their fear turned to anger, and they cried out to Moses. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses stood firm, his faith unshaken. "Do not be afraid," he yelled out, his voice ringing with authority. "Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then a divine command came to Moses. "Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground." Moses did as he was told. He stretched his hand out over the water. All through the night, a strong east wind blew, pushing the waters back. A miracle unfolded before their very eyes. The Red Sea parted, the waters piling up like towering walls on either side, revealing a path of dry land through the heart of the deep. The pillar of fire moved behind them, a barrier of light to the Israelites and a wall of darkness to the Egyptians, holding the army at bay. With awe and trembling, the Israelites began their crossing, walking on the seabed with liquid walls rising high on their left and their right. They marched through the night, the entire nation passing from one shore to the other. As dawn approached, the last Israelite stepped onto the far bank. The Egyptian army, blinded by their pursuit, charged into the sea path. Chariots, horses, and soldiers flooded the corridor of dry land. Just as they reached the middle, the Lord spoke to Moses again. "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and upon their horsemen." Moses stretched his hand over the sea. With a thunderous roar, the walls of water collapsed. The sea returned to its full force, crashing down upon Pharaoh's mighty army. Chariots were swamped, soldiers were swept away. The great force that had terrified a nation was utterly destroyed. Not one of them survived. As the sun rose, The Israelites looked back across the water. The bodies of their former masters washed up on the shore. The threat was gone. Their chains were truly broken. A great cheer erupted from the people. They saw the great power the Lord had used against the Egyptians, and they were filled with awe. Miriam, Moses' sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her with tambourines and dancing. She sang, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea." Their song of freedom echoed across the desert, a powerful testament to the miracle they had witnessed. They were no longer slaves. They were a free people, standing at the beginning of a long and challenging journey toward the promised land, with their faith forged in the fire of affliction and the waters of the Red Sea. Their story of liberation would be told for generations, a timeless tale of faith, courage, and divine deliverance. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more epic tales from history. In the vast, silent desert at the foot of Mount Sinai, a nation held its breath. 40 days had passed since their leader, Moses, ascended the cloud-covered peak to meet with God. Down below, the Israelites, recently freed from generations of slavery in Egypt, grievous. The thunder and lightning that had once terrified them now seemed a distant memory, and the man who had led them through the parted sea was gone. Where was Moses? Had this unforgiving mountain consumed him? Had their God abandoned them? Fear, a seed planted in the soil of uncertainty, began to sprout. It grew into a murmur, a clamor, a wave of panic sweeping through the camp. The people gathered, their faces a mixture of anxiety and defiance, and surrounded the tent of Aaron, Moses' brother, the one left in charge. "Come, make us gods who will go before us," they demanded. "As for this fellow Moses, the man who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Their faith, once strong enough to cross a sea, now wavered after just a few weeks of waiting. Aaron, faced with a potential rebellion, made a fateful decision. Perhaps he hoped to stall them, to shock them into silence with the weight of their own requests. "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing," he commanded, "and bring them to me." He might have thought they would refuse to part with their precious treasures, the spoils from their departure from Egypt, but he underestimated their desperation. Eagerly, the people stripped themselves of their gold, presenting a glittering pile at Aaron's feet. With the heavy heart of a leader, bowing to the pressure of his people, Aaron took the gold. He melted it down in a furnace and, using a graving tool, fashioned it into the shape of a calf, a molten idol. When the people saw the gleaming figure, a collective cheer erupted. "These are your gods, Israel," they proclaimed, "who brought you up out of Egypt." The memory of the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who had sent plagues and performed miracles, was eclipsed in an instant by a lifeless statue of gold. Seeing their enthusiasm, Aaron went a step further, perhaps trying to co-opt the pagan celebration and redirect it. He built an altar before the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there is to be a festival to the Lord." But his attempt to sanctify the moment failed. The next day, the people rose early. They brought burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. They sat down to eat and drink, and then they rose up to indulge in revelry. The solemn worship of God devolved into a wild, pagan festival at the foot of the holy mountain. The very ground where they had promised to obey God's commands was now desecrated by idolatry. High above the camp, on the sacred peak of Sinai, God's conversation with Moses took a dark turn. "Go down," God said, his voice laced with holy wrath, "because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it. I have seen these people, and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." The fate of Israel hung by a thread, but Moses, the faithful intermediary, stood in the breach. He pleaded with God, not for his own glory, but for the sake of God's own name and promises. He reminded God of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Why should the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Moses argued, and through his passionate intercession, God relented from the disaster he had planned, carrying 2 stone tablets, inscribed by the very finger of God with the 10 Commandments. Moses began his descent. As he and his aide Joshua neared the camp, they heard the noise. Joshua, a military man, thought it was the sound of war, but Moses knew better. It is not the sound of victory. It is not the sound of defeat. It is the sound of singing that I hear. As they entered the camp, the scene confirmed Moses' worst fears. He saw the golden calf and the people dancing around it in frenzied worship. A righteous fury, a reflection of God's own anger, seized him. In a powerful symbolic act, he threw the stone tablets to the ground, shattering them at the foot of the mountain. The law was broken before it was even delivered, a physical manifestation of Israel's broken covenant. Moses then seized the calf they had made, burned it in the fire, and ground it to powder. He scattered the powder on the water and made the Israelites drink it, a bitter taste of their own sign. He turned to his brother, his voice sharp with betrayal. What did these people do to you, that you led them into such great sin? Aaron's defense was weak, shifting blame. Do not be angry, my lord, he stammered. You know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, make us gods who will go before us. So I told them, whoever has any gold, take it off. They gave me the gold, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. His answer was a flimsy excuse, a desperate attempt to minimize his own complicity in the disaster. The consequences were severe. Moses stood at the entrance to the camp and cried out, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. The Levites, his own tribe, rallied to his side. On God's command, they went through the camp and executed about 3,000 of the instigators, purging the evil from their midst. A plague followed, a divine judgment upon the people for what they had done with the calf Aaron had made. The story of the golden calf is a stark and sober reminder of the fragility of faith and the devastating consequences of trading the divine for a golden idol. It's a story of a people's impatience, a leader's weakness, and a prophet's righteous anger. For Aaron, it was the greatest mistake of his life, a shadow that would follow him despite his later consecration as high priest. And for Israel, it was a deep scar on their journey, a powerful lesson learned in the shadow of Sinai about the nature of sin, repentance, and the unwavering holiness of the one true God. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more explorations into these timeless tales. The desert air hung heavy and still at the foot of Mount Sinai. 40 days had passed. 40 long, silent days since Moses, their leader, had ascended into the thick, swirling cloud that capped the mountain's peak. A cloud alive with thunder and fire. Down below, a seed of impatience had been planted among the Israelites, and now it was beginning to sprout into a bitter root of fear and doubt. Murmurs rippled through the camp like a desert wind, growing from whispers to a collective, anxious roar. Where was Moses? Had this strange, remote God of his abandoned? Had the mountain consumed him? The memory of their miraculous deliverance from Egypt was already fading, replaced by the gnawing uncertainty of the present. They were a people adrift in a vast, unforgiving wilderness, and their anchor was gone. Finally, the crowd could bear the silence no longer. They surged toward the tent of Aaron, Moses' brother, their faces a mixture of desperation and demand. "Come!" they shouted, their voices unified in a single, powerful cry. "Make us gods who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Their fear had curdled into a demand for something tangible, something they could see and touch, a God of their own making to replace the invisible God who seemed so distant. Aaron, standing before this volatile sea of humanity, felt the immense pressure of their collective panic. Perhaps he feared for his own life. Perhaps his own faith wavered in the face of such overwhelming doubt. Whatever his reasons, he made a fateful decision. He yielded. "Take off the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me," he commanded. There was a flurry of activity as people eagerly stripped themselves of their jewelry, the very gold likely plundered from their Egyptian masters upon their departure. A gleaming pile of gold grew at Aaron's feet, a testament to their readiness to trade their past for a comforting, immediate idol. From this pile of precious metal, a new god was forged. Aaron took the gold, melted it down in a fire, and with a craftsman's tool, he shaped it. Out of the crucible of fear and impatience emerged a molten calf, a golden idol. It was a symbol familiar to them, reminiscent of the bull gods of Ashipeth, the very culture of bondage they had just escaped. When the people saw it, a wave of relief and excitement washed over them. "These are your gods, O Israel," they proclaimed, "who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Their historical memory was tragically short, their gratitude misplaced onto a lifeless statue. Aaron, swept up in the moment, or perhaps trying to control the uncontrollable, built an altar before the calf. He then made a proclamation, attempting to blend this pagan act with their monotheistic faith. "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." But the people's celebration was not for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The next day, they rose early, brought burnt offerings and peace offerings, and then the solemnity of sacrifice devolved into a wild, hedonistic revelry. The Bible tells us the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. It was a scene of chaos, a complete rejection of the covenant they had so recently entered into. They danced and sang before the golden calf, giving it the worship and glory that belonged to God alone. Meanwhile, high above the frenzied camp, within the holy fire on Mount Sinai, a different conversation was taking place. God's voice, which had been dictating the laws of a holy nation, now burned with righteous anger. He spoke to Moses, "Go down, for your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way that I commanded them." God saw the idolatry, the betrayal, the spiritual adultery happening at the foot of his holy mountain. His judgment was swift and severe. "Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, and I will make of you a great nation in Tatmomen." The very existence of Israel hung by a thread. God was ready to wipe them out and start over with Moses. With a heavy heart, Moses turned and began his descent down the mountain. In his hands, he carried 2 stone tablets, inscribed by the very finger of God the 10 Commandments, the foundation of the covenant. As he and his attendant Joshua neared the camp, they heard the noise. Joshua, a military man, mistook it for the sound of battle. But Moses knew better. "It is not the sound of shouting for victory, or the sound of the cry of defeat," he sighed grimly, "but the sound of singing that I hear." As they came closer, the scene came into full view. Moses saw it all, the calf, shimmering in the desert sun, and the people, his people, dancing wildly around it. The sight shattered him. The sacred covenant, captured on the stone in his hands, was being flagrantly violated before his very eyes. A holy fury, a reflection of God's own righteous anger, surged through him. He lifted the precious tablets high, and with all his might, he hurled them down at the base of the mountain. They shattered into 1,000 pieces, a stark, physical symbol of Israel's broken covenant with their God. Moses strode into the center of the camp. The revelry died down as the people saw the fury on his face. He seized the golden calf, the object of their worship, and threw it into the fire. He ground it into a fine powder, scattered it on the surface of the water, and in a powerful act of judgment, he made the Israelites drink it. He forced them to ingest the very substance of their sin, to consume the bitter consequences of their idolatry. He then confronted Aaron, his own brother, demanding to know how he had let this happen. Aaron's response was weak, blaming the people's evil nature and downplaying his own role in the affair. But the day of reckoning was not over. Moses stood at the entrance of the camp and issued a call to arms, a call for loyalty. "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." The sons of Levi, his own tribe, rallied to his side. Following a divine command, they went through the camp, and a terrible judgment was executed. About 3,000 men who had led the rebellion fell that day. It was a brutal, tragic consequence, a surgical strike to cut the cancer of idolatry from the heart of the nation before it could destroy them all. The next day a somber quiet fell over the camp. Moses addressed the survivors. "You have sinned a great sin," he told them. But even after this terrible judgment, Moses' heart was still that of an intercessor. He told them he would go back up the mountain to try and make atonement for their sin. Once again before God, he made one of the most selfless pleas in all of Scripture. Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of the book that you have written. Moses was willing to have his own name erased from God's book of life if it would mean salvation for his people. God affirmed his justice, stating that only the one who sinned would be blotted out, but he heard the heart of his servant. While a plague would still come upon the people as a consequence, the nation of Israel was spared from annihilation. The story of the golden calf stands as a stark and timeless warning about the human tendency to stray, the danger of replacing faith with sight, and the terrible cost of idolatry. Yet, it is also a profound story of grace, story of a God whose anger is righteous, but whose mercy can be stirred, and the story of a flawed human leader who stood in the gap, showing us the powerful, world-changing nature of true intercession. In the vast, silent desert at the foot of Mount Sinai, a nation held its breath. 40 days had passed since their leader, Moses, ascended the cloud-covered peak to meet with God. Down below, the Israelites, recently freed from generations of slavery in Egypt, grievous. The thunder and lightning that had once terrified them now seemed a distant memory, and the man who had led them through the parted sea was gone. Where was Moses? Had this unforgiving mountain consumed him? Had their God abandoned them? Fear, a seed planted in the soil of uncertainty, began to sprout. It grew into a murmur, a clamor, a wave of panic sweeping through the camp. The people gathered, their faces a mixture of anxiety and defiance, and surrounded the tent of Aaron, Moses' brother, the one left in charge. "Come, make us gods who will go before us," they demanded. "As for this fellow Moses, the man who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Their faith, once strong enough to cross a sea, now wavered after just a few weeks of waiting. Aaron, faced with a potential rebellion, made a fateful decision. Perhaps he hoped to stall them, to shock them into silence with the weight of their own requests. "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing," he commanded, "and bring them to me." He might have thought they would refuse to part with their precious treasures, the spoils from their departure from Egypt, but he underestimated their desperation. Eagerly, the people stripped themselves of their gold, presenting a glittering pile at Aaron's feet. With the heavy heart of a leader, bowing to the pressure of his people, Aaron took the gold. He melted it down in a furnace and, using a graving tool, fashioned it into the shape of a calf, a molten idol. When the people saw the gleaming figure, a collective cheer erupted. "These are your gods, Israel," they proclaimed, "who brought you up out of Egypt." The memory of the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who had sent plagues and performed miracles, was eclipsed in an instant by a lifeless statue of gold. Seeing their enthusiasm, Aaron went a step further, perhaps trying to co-opt the pagan celebration and redirect it. He built an altar before the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there is to be a festival to the Lord." But his attempt to sanctify the moment failed. The next day, the people rose early. They brought burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. They sat down to eat and drink, and then they rose up to indulge in revelry. The solemn worship of God devolved into a wild, pagan festival at the foot of the holy mountain. The very ground where they had promised to obey God's commands was now desecrated by idolatry. High above the camp, on the sacred peak of Sinai, God's conversation with Moses took a dark turn. "Go down," God said, his voice laced with holy wrath, "because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it. I have seen these people, and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." The fate of Israel hung by a thread, but Moses, the faithful intermediary, stood in the breach. He pleaded with God, not for his own glory, but for the sake of God's own name and promises. He reminded God of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Why should the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Moses argued, and through his passionate intercession, God relented from the disaster he had planned. carrying 2 stone tablets, inscribed by the very finger of God with the 10 Commandments. Moses began his descent. As he and his aide Joshua neared the camp, they heard the noise. Joshua, a military man, thought it was the sound of war. But Moses knew better. It is not the sound of victory. It is not the sound of defeat. It is the sound of singing that I hear. As they entered the camp, the scene confirmed Moses' worst fears. He saw the golden calf and the people dancing around it in frenzied worship. A righteous fury, a reflection of God's own anger, seized him. In a powerful symbolic act, he threw the stone tablets to the ground, shattering them at the foot of the mountain. The law was broken before it was even delivered, a physical manifestation of Israel's broken covenant. Moses then seized the calf they had made, burned it in the fire, and ground it to powder. He scattered the powder on the water and made the Israelites drink it, a bitter taste of their own sign. He turned to his brother, his voice sharp with betrayal. "What did these people do to you, that you led them into such great sin?" Aaron's defense was weak, shifting blame. "Do not be angry, my lord," he stammered. "You know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, 'Make us gods who will go before us.' So I told them, 'Whoever has any gold, take it off.' They gave me the gold, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf." His answer was a flimsy excuse, a desperate attempt to minimize his own complicity in the disaster. The consequences were severe. Moses stood at the entrance to the camp and cried out, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." The Levites, his own tribe, rallied to his side. On God's command, they went through the camp and executed about 3,000 of the instigators, purging the evil from their midst. A plague followed, a divine judgment upon the people for what they had done with the calf Aaron had made. The story of the golden calf is a stark and sober reminder of the fragility of faith and the devastating consequences of trading the divine for a golden idol. It's a story of a people's impatience, a leader's weakness, and a prophet's righteous anger. For Aaron, it was the greatest mistake of his life, a shadow that would follow him despite his later consecration as high priest. And for Israel, it was a deep scar on their journey, a powerful lesson learned in the shadow of Sinai about the nature of sin, repentance, and the unwavering holiness of the one true God. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more explorations into these timeless tales. This choice screams a powerful message. God's calling is not based on our perfection, but on His grace. He doesn't look for flawless people, because there are none. He looks for hearts that can be molded and used for His purposes, even after they've failed spectacularly. Aaron's story becomes a testament to the idea that our biggest mistakes don't have to define our destiny when God's forgiveness is involved. So, how does a man go from building an idol to standing in God's holy presence? Through a detailed and symbolic process of consecration. For 7 days, Aaron and his sons were set apart. They were washed with water, symbolizing purification and a fresh start. Then, they were dressed in a set of extraordinary garments, each piece overflowing with meaning. Let's talk about this incredible outfit. It wasn't just clothing. It was a visual representation of the high priest's role. He wore a linen tunic and breeches, symbolizing purity and righteousness. Over this was a blue robe, adorned with golden bells and embroidered pomegranates. The bells would jingle as he moved, announcing his presence in the holy place, a constant reminder that approaching God was a serious and sacred act. Then came the ephod, a beautiful, apron-like garment woven with gold, blue, purple, and scarlet threads. Attached to its shoulder pieces were 2 onyx stones, and engraved on these stones were the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. Every time Aaron entered the sanctuary, he literally carried the names of the people on his shoulders, representing his responsibility to bear their burdens before God. And then there was the breastpiece of judgment, the most intricate part of all. It was a square pouch, woven from the same fine materials as the ephod, set with 12 different precious stones, each one representing one of the 12 tribes. This meant that Aaron carried the people not just on his shoulders, but also over his heart, showing God's deep love and concern for them. Inside this pouch were the Urim and Thummim, mysterious objects used to discern God's will. Finally, on his head, Aaron wore a turban with a solid gold plate on the front, inscribed with the words "Holy to the Lord." This declared that both the priests and his service were dedicated entirely to God. After being dressed, Aaron and his sons were anointed with a special, fragrant oil, a sign that God's Spirit was upon them, equipping them for their sacred duties. Sacrifices were mightable for a sin offering to atone for their own unworthiness, and rams for a burnt offering and an offering of ordination. Blood from the sacrifice was dabbed on their right earlobes, right thumbs, and right big toes. This symbolized that everything they heard, everything they did, and everywhere they went was to be consecrated to the service of God. This elaborate ceremony wasn't just for show, it was a powerful lesson for Israel. It taught them that no one could just stroll into God's presence. Sin had created a barrier, and bridging that gap required a mediator, a priest who was himself cleansed, consecrated, and set apart by God's own command. So, what did Aaron do as high priest? His primary role was to be an intercessor, a bridge between a holy God and a sinful people. He was the only person allowed to enter the most holy place, the inner sanctum of the tabernacle where God's presence dwelt. And he could only do so once a year, on the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. On this solemn day, Aaron would first offer sacrifices for his own sins and the sins of his family. He had to be right with God before he could represent the people. Only then could he make atonement for the entire nation. He would carry the blood of the sacrifice into the most holy place and sprinkle it on the mercy seat, the golden lid of the Ark of the Covenant. This act symbolized that the penalty for the people's sin was paid, and God's mercy could flow. He also oversaw the entire sacrificial system. Every day, priests would offer sacrifices on behalf of the people, for all kinds of reasons: for giving thanks, for making vows, and for atoning for unintentional sins. Aaron and his descendants were responsible for ensuring everything was done according to God's precise instructions. They taught the people God's laws, distinguishing between what was holy and what was common, what was clean and what was unclean. They were the spiritual and moral guides of the nation. The establishment of the Aaronic priesthood was a profound act of God's mercy. It provided a clear, tangible way for the Israelites to approach God. It acknowledged their sinfulness, but didn't leave them in it. Instead, it gave them a system of atonement and a representative who could stand in the gap for them. Aaron's story is a beautiful paradox. His greatest failure became the backdrop for God's greatest display of grace in his life. The man who led Israel in idolatry became the man who would lead them in worship. The one who broke the covenant became the one who administered its restoration year after year. This story echoes into our lives today. We may not have a golden calf in our backyard, but we all have moments of failure. Times when we fall short. Aaron's journey reminds us that our story doesn't end with our mistakes. God's grace is bigger than our biggest failures. He can take our broken pieces and not just forgive them, but transform them into a testimony of his redemptive power. The priesthood of Aaron, with all its ritual and symbolism, ultimately points to an even greater high priest, Jesus, who entered the heavenly sanctuary once and for all, not with the blood of bulls and goats, but with his own, securing an eternal redemption for all who believe. Aaron's priesthood was the shadow. Christ is the substance. And in that, we find the ultimate expression of God's incredible, unfailing grace. Thanks so much for watching with me today. If this story of grace and redemption resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the powerful stories of the Bible. In the vast and unforgiving wilderness, the people of Israel journeyed, their faith and endurance tested daily. Led by Moses and his brother Aaron, they followed the pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. But beneath the surface of this divine guidance, a dangerous undercurrent of discontent was brewing, ready to erupt into open rebellion. This is the story of Korah, a man whose ambition nearly tore the nation apart. Korah was a Levite from the same tribe as Moses and Aaron. He was a man of status and influence. He looked at Moses, the great leader, and Aaron, the high priest, and saw not God's chosen, but men who had, in his eyes, exalted themselves above the congregation. He believed that all of Israel was holy, so why should leadership be confined to just two brothers? This seed of envy found fertile ground. Korah gathered to his side Dathan and Abiram, two leaders from the tribe of Reuben, and On, another Reubenite. Together, they amassed 250 prominent men, well-respected leaders of the community. all united by a common grievance. Their challenge was direct and public. They assembled before Moses and Aaron and declared, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" The accusation was sharp, striking at the very heart of Moses and Aaron's authority. Upon hearing this, Moses fell on his face, a gesture of deep humility and distress before God. He knew this wasn't just a political squabble. It was a rebellion against the Lord himself. Rising, he addressed Korah and his followers. He proposed a test to reveal God's true will. "Tomorrow morning," Moses announced, "the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy." He instructed Korah and his 250 followers to take their censers, the metal pans used for burning incense, put fire and incense in them, and present them before the Lord at the tabernacle entrance. Aaron would do the same. "The man the Lord chooses," Moses declared, "he will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far." Moses then turned to Korah specifically, reminding him of the great privilege the Levites already had to serve in the tabernacle, to minister to the community. "Isn't that enough for you?" he asked. "But you are seeking the priesthood as well." He made it clear their complaint was not against him and Aaron, but against the Lord who had appointed them. Moses then summoned Dathan and Abiram, but they refused to come. From their tents, they sent back a defiant message, accusing Moses of leading them from a land of milk and honey, Egypt only, to let them perish in the wilderness. They twisted the narrative, painting Moses not as a deliverer but as a failed leader who sought to lord it over them. Their refusal to even appear was an act of extreme contempt. The next day, the stage was set for a divine confrontation. Korah had incited the entire community to gather against Moses and Aaron at the entrance to the tabernacle. Suddenly, the glory of the Lord appeared to the whole assembly. God's voice boomed, telling Moses and Aaron to separate themselves from the crowd, so that I can put an end to them in a moment. But Moses and Aaron interceded, pleading for the people. "Oh, God," they cried, "will you be angry with the entire assembly when only one man sins?" The Lord relented but commanded the community to move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Moses announced the definitive test. "This is how you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these things, and that it was not my idea. If these men die a natural death, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them, with everything that belongs to them, then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt." As soon as he finished speaking, the ground beneath the feet of Dathan and Abiram split apart. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them, their families, and all their possessions. Their tents, their households, everything vanished into the chasm, and the earth closed over them. They were erased from the community in a terrifying display of divine judgment. At the same time, a fire blazed forth from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense with Korah. The rebellion was brutally and decisively crushed, but the story doesn't end there. The very next day, the Israelites began to grumble again. They accused Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the Lord's people." As they gathered against them, the glory of the Lord again appeared, and a deadly plague began to spread through the camp. Moses urgently told Aaron to take his censer, make atonement for the people, and stand between the living and the dead. Aaron did so, and the plague was stopped. But not before 14,700 people had died, in addition to those who died in Korah's rebellion. To put an end to the grumbling, and to permanently establish the authority of Aaron's priesthood, God commanded one final sign. Moses was to collect a staff from the leader of each of the 12 tribes, with each leader's name inscribed on his staff. On the staff for the tribe of Levi, he was to write Aaron's name. The 12 staffs were then placed inside the tabernacle, before the Ark of the Covenant. God said, "The staff of the man I choose will sprout, and I will rid myself of this constant grumbling against you." The next day, Moses entered the tabernacle. He found that of all the staffs, only Aaron's had changed. It had not only sprouted but had budded, blossomed, and produced ripe almonds overnight. It was a miracle of life and fruitfulness in the midst of death and rebellion. Moses brought out all the staffs and showed them to the people. They saw the undeniable proof of God's choice. Aaron's budding rod became a lasting sign, kept in the Ark of the Covenant, a permanent reminder of who God had chosen and the dire consequences of challenging his divine order. The rebellion was over, and the leadership of Moses and the priesthood of Aaron were forever confirmed, not by human ambition, but by the unmistakable hand of God. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content that explores these timeless narratives. In the heart of the wilderness, near the border of Edom, a solemn procession made its way up the slopes of Mount Hor. 3 figures ascended. Moses, the great leader of Israel, his brother Aaron, the first high priest, and Eleazar, Aaron's son. They climbed not for conquest or discovery, but to fulfill a divine command. At this summit under the vast desert sky, a profound and poignant moment in the history of a nation was about to unfold. This was the end of an era, the final chapter in the life of a man who had stood beside Moses through liberation and rebellion, miracles and hardships. This was the passing of Aaron. But to understand the significance of this moment, we must travel back in time to the land of Egypt, where the story of Aaron truly begins. Born 3 years before his younger brother Moses, Aaron belonged to the tribe of Levi, a people enslaved under the harsh rule of Pharaoh. While Moses was raised in the splendor of the Egyptian court, Aaron grew up among his people, sharing in their suffering and their hope for deliverance. He was a man of the community, known for his eloquence and his steady presence. When the time came for God to deliver the Israelites, it was Aaron who was chosen to be Moses' spokesman. Moses, who described himself as slow of speech and tongue, hesitated to confront the mighty Pharaoh. So God appointed Aaron to be his voice, his prophet. Imagine the scene. 2 brothers, one raised a prince, the other a slave, standing together before the most powerful ruler on earth. Aaron, with courage and conviction, spoke the words of God, his voice ringing with authority as he announced the coming plagues and demanded, "Let my people go." He was not merely a mouthpiece. His staff, when cast down, became a serpent, and it was he who stretched it out over the waters of Egypt, turning them to blood. He was an active participant in the divine drama of liberation. Following the miraculous parting of the Red Sea and the escape from Egypt, the Israelites found themselves in the vast and unforgiving Sinai wilderness. It was here that Aaron's role was elevated to a sacred, unprecedented status. At the foot of Mount Sinai, while Moses received the 10 Commandments, God established the Aaronic priesthood, anointing Aaron and his sons as the spiritual mediators for the entire nation. Aaron became the first high priest, the Kohen Gadol. This was an immense honor, a sacred trust. He was tasked with overseeing the rituals and sacrifices in the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary that housed the very presence of God. Dressed in magnificent vestments, the breastplate with its 12 precious stones representing the tribes of Israel, the ephod, and the turban inscribed with "Holy to the Lord." Aaron would enter the Holy of Holies once a year on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, to make atonement for the sins of the people. He was the bridge between a holy God and a fallible nation. Yet, Aaron's journey was not without its profound failures. His story is a powerful reminder that even the most chosen can stumble. The most infamous of these moments was the incident of the golden calf. With Moses away on the mountain for 40 days, the people grew restless and fearful. They approached Aaron, demanding he make them a god to lead them. In a moment of weakness, perhaps overwhelmed by the pressure of the crowd, Aaron complied. He collected their gold and fashioned a molten calf, an idol that directly violated the commandment they had just received. This act of apostasy provoked God's righteous anger and became a permanent stain on Israel's history and on Aaron's own record. Though he was forgiven, it was a stark lesson in the frailty of human leadership. Silent grief speaks volumes, a testament to his submission to God's judgment. Even amidst unimaginable personal pain, he had to carry the weight of his office while his heart was breaking. For 40 years, Aaron served as high priest, guiding Israel's spiritual life through the wilderness wanderings. He stood with Moses during the rebellion of Korah, where his budding staff miraculously confirmed his divine appointment. He mediated, he taught, and he interceded for the people. But he, along with Moses, would also share in a fateful mistake. At the waters of Meribah, when the people grumbled for water, they were commanded to speak to a rock. Instead, an exasperated Moses struck it twice, because they did not sanctify God in the eyes of the people. Both Moses and Aaron were forbidden from entering the promised land. brings us back to that final ascent up Mount Hor. At the summit, as instructed by God, Moses removed the sacred priestly garments from Aaron and placed them upon Eleazar, his son. This symbolic act signified the peaceful and orderly transfer of the high priesthood. The leadership would continue, with his life's work complete and his legacy secured in his son. Aaron died there on the mountain, at the age of 123. The entire nation mourned him for 30 days, a testament to the love and respect he had earned. Aaron's legacy is immense and enduring. He established the priestly lineage that would serve Israel for over a millennium, right through the time of the Second Temple. He is remembered not as a flawless hero, but as a deeply human figure, eloquent, yet fallible, chosen yet capable of great error, a leader who knew both divine favor and profound tragedy. His life is a complex tapestry of faith, failure, and forgiveness. He stands as a symbol of mediation, the one who stood in the gap between God and man, foreshadowing a greater high priest to come. The story of Aaron, the first high priest of Israel, is a timeless narrative of service, sacrifice, and the enduring power of a sacred calling. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into history. Have you ever felt like you're just a supporting character in someone else's story? Or maybe that your past mistakes disqualify you from having a real purpose? Today, let's talk about a man who lived in the shadow of a giant, made some monumental mistakes, and yet was still called by God to a position of incredible honor. Let's explore the life of Aaron. We first meet Aaron when his younger brother, Moses, is having a crisis of confidence. God has just commanded Moses to go to Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of Egypt. But Moses is full of excuses. "Who am I to do this?" he asks. "I'm not a good speaker." And God's solution is beautiful. He doesn't just command Moses to be brave. He gives him a partner. He says, "What about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well." From that moment, Aaron becomes Moses' mouthpiece, his right-hand man. Imagine the scene. Two brothers, one hesitant and one eloquent, standing before the most powerful ruler in the world. Together, they confront Pharaoh, demanding freedom for their people. Aaron is the one who casts down his staff, watching it transform into a serpent. He's the one who stretches out that same staff over the waters of Egypt, turning the mighty Nile River to blood. Through 10 terrifying plagues, Aaron is right there, witnessing God's overwhelming power. He sees hail of fire, swarms of locusts, and a darkness so thick it could be felt. He and Moses are a team, a dynamic duo, chosen by God to perform miracles and liberate an entire nation. After centuries of slavery, they lead millions of people out of bondage, through the parted Red Sea, and into the vast wilderness, toward a promised land. It's a story of incredible triumph and faith, but the wilderness is a harsh teacher, and the people's faith is fragile. While Moses is up on Mount Sinai, receiving the 10 Commandments directly from God, the Israelites grow restless. 40 days is a long time to wait when you've just left everything you've ever known. They come to Aaron, the leader left in charge, and they make a terrifying demand. "Make us gods who will go before us." And here, we see Aaron's greatest failure. The man who stood bravely before Pharaoh now crumbles under the pressure of the people. Instead of reminding them of the God who split the sea, he tells them to bring him their gold earrings. He melts them down and fashions a golden calf, an idol. He builds an altar and declares a festival to this lifeless statue. When Moses comes down from the mountain, his heart breaks at the sight. The celebration of idolatry is in full swing, a direct violation of the very first commandments God had just given him. The consequences are severe. Moses confronts Aaron, who makes weak excuses, saying, "I just threw the gold into the fire, and out came this calf." It's a moment of profound weakness, a stark reminder that even those who witness miracles can stumble badly. You would think this is where Aaron's story ends, a disgraced leader, cast aside for his terrible sin. But that's not how our God works. While there are consequences, God's story is one of grace and restoration. After a period of judgment and repentance, God gives a surprising command. He instructs Moses to set apart Aaron and his sons for a unique and holy purpose. He is to be consecrated as Israel's first high priest. Think about the sheer mercy in that act. The man who facilitated the worship of a golden calf would now be the one to enter the most holy place once a year, to make atonement for the sins of the entire nation. His job would be to mediate between a holy God and a sinful people. His garments would be intricately designed with bells on the hem, so the people could hear him moving, and on his chest, breastplate with 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel carried over his heart before the Lord. God didn't choose the perfect man for the job. He chose a flawed, broken man and redeemed him. He took Aaron's failure and, through forgiveness, transformed it into a testimony of his own grace. Aaron's life from this point on was dedicated to the priesthood, teaching the people God's laws and leading them in worship. However, his journey wasn't without further pain. In a tragic event, 2 of his sons, Nadab and Abihu, offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, disregarding God's specific instructions for worship, and fire from the Lord consumed them. Aaron's response in the face of this devastating loss is just 3 words in the scriptures. And Aaron was silent. It's a silence filled with grief, and a deep, painful understanding of the holiness of God. His obedience, even in sorrow, shows how much he had grown. Aaron's life journey ends on Mount Hor, just before the Israelites entered the Promised Land, because of an earlier instance of disobedience at Meribah, where he and Moses struck a rock instead of speaking to it. He was not permitted to enter. On that mountain, Moses removes Aaron's priestly garments and places them on his son, Eleazar, signifying the transfer of the priesthood. And there, at 123 years old, Aaron dies. So what do we take away from this incredible life? It shows us that we can be standing on the front lines of God's work one day and give in to fear and pressure the next. But more importantly, it shows us that our failures don't define us in God's eyes. God is a master of restoration. He takes our broken pieces, our golden calf moments, and through his forgiveness, he can still build something beautiful and holy for his glory. His calling on your life is not dependent on your perfection, but on his power. Like Aaron, you may feel like a supporting character. You may carry the weight of past mistakes, but the God who called Aaron is the same God who calls you. He sees you, he loves you, and he has a divine purpose for you. Not in spite of your weaknesses, but often right through them. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of faith and redemption. See you next time.